Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I am joined today, and I am joined, as always and forever, by my good friend and business partner, the dear Jason Johnston Yellen.
You said forever there with almost a hint of foreboding. Like, this is my shackle until the end of days. Which, the good news is, it could be December umpteenth of this year. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and forever. You said, and forever.
Well, you know, I'm never one to tell someone that their feelings are wrong, that their perceptions of a particular situation is wrong. But I would say that you are wrong. So.
That you said it with foreboding.
Yeah, I did not say it with foreboding.
Okay.
No, that was more like, yeah, I thought it was a good thing that we were going with there.
Let's jump straight into being wrong, because I think that's a thread that our listeners would enjoy us pulling at. The good James Foster wrote in, and James is a learned fellow. I had the distinct honour of teaching with James Foster at the University of Idaho back in the day. And nobody knows Greek and Latin the way that James Foster does. And so when in the last episode, I believe it was, I was mentioning a paean, right? A paean.
Yeah, correct.
Right? The David Jennings book, To Wild Turkey.
Yeah, not a paella, but a paean.
Not a paella. And so the wonderful James Foster, the learned James Foster, the newly retired James Foster.
That's right.
He's now got more time to reach out to me and tell me what I'm doing wrong. He wrote in and he said, paean, which we're about to find out, is from the Greek and so is pronounced paean. So there you go. It's paean.
Paean, like I just drank a water and now I'm going to do a lot of peeing. Exactly. Yes, okay. It is connected to urine. So peeing. Yeah. So to correct the record, in my opinion, David Jennings wrote a wonderful, almost a beautiful paean to Wild Turkey Distillery and the Russells, who have distilled there for many a decade. So before you had said it's related to urine, then you said peeing, and then I'm like, urine peeing?
Is this a European joke? I feel like I've stumbled into National Lampoon territory now.
I think you did. I will say this. As someone who works with, on a daily basis, a person who often tells me when I'm wrong and puts me in my place. It's nice to know that it does trickle down. You've got James Foster putting you in your place.
I see what you did there with the peeing humor. Okay, it has trickled down. Gotcha. With you.
Right, and then it trickles down yet again to me, and it's all over my shoes at the moment.
One could argue that I learned it from James Foster, and like any good parent who learns it from his dad, he has passed it on to the next generation. And so, in my eyes, Joshua, you're the next generation. Oh. And so, if I can correct you in any way, shape, or form, I will be continuing on the legacy of James Foster.
If you could just stop correcting me in every way, shape, and form. I'd be a little happier, Jason.
Yeah, so it happens when you fuck a stranger in the Alps, Joshua. This is what happens. Speaking of, this has been rattling around in my brain.
Wow.
So I watched a Simon Pegg movie the other night. Uh-huh. Spoiler alert, it was terrible. From 2011, Simon Pegg, Jeff Daniels, Kirsten Dunst, Megan Fox, Gillian Anderson, right?
This is a good cast so far.
Right? Such a terrible, terrible movie. But what's interesting is with Jeff Daniels, he plays this head of a New York-based magazine, kind of a fashion magazine, a little bit gossipy, that type of thing. And he plays the head of this, the founding head of this magazine. They had multiple Big Lebowski references in the script that became kind of interesting to keep an eye out for. And after the third one, I was kind of like, okay, I get it. You're making Big Lebowski references, but at what point will you make a reference to the Jesus, right? And about maybe 40 or 50 minutes after I had that thought, somebody surprises Simon Pegg, and he goes, Jesus! And I was like,
wow, look
there
at that.
It is.
There
it is.
Was this...
Was
this the one where he had the long hair and he was scared of everything? He was kind of... No,
that one's not an easy watch, but I found it somewhat enjoyable. No, this one is something like how to lose friends and uninfluence people.
I know what you're talking about. Because
alienate people, maybe?
Yep. I saw the cover, like the movie poster to that, because I was searching for his new show. He's got a new show with what's his name? Nick Frost, and where they're ghost hunters.
Yes.
Yep. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah. You ever gone back and ever watched Spaced with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost? I know I've recommended it for approximately a decade, maybe 12 years. Ever watched it? Ever seen it?
I have seen maybe one or two episodes. There's another person in the show. It's a woman. She does stuff with Ricky Gervais now, right?
Does she?
Doesn't she?
So her name used to be Jessica Stevenson, and then she used her married name, and I forget what her married name is, but she was Jessica Stevenson back in 1999 in the first season of Spaced. Well, which I highly recommend to all the listeners.
I recall watching 2 episodes and then I didn't go back to it.
While you're dismissing me, let me go back to we had a nation member, and I apologize, I'm blanking on the name, and I never have Facebook open, but one of our members reached out to say Pete Smoke & Spirit by Andrew Jefford was also one of their favorite whiskey books.
I remember seeing that.
And they appreciated the mention in the podcast. And then another member jumped in to say, but have you seen the price on it? And so I just wanted to say in the podcast what I answered on Facebook to this member. They've actually changed the title of Pete Smoke & Spirit by Andrew Jefford. And it's now called Whisky Island, which I think is an objectively terrible title. But you can now find copies of Whisky Island available for normal paperback pricing.
And it's the same book.
Pete Smoke & Spirit, I think I saw offered for like $150.
Are you kidding me? I have first press hardcover.
Yeah, well, that's probably $300. But you're not a book flipper. You know, you would never think about flipping a whiskey book.
I flip the pages.
Oh, well done. That was quite impressive. I'll give you that one. So if you do want to read Pete Smoke & Spirit, but you don't want to pay an exorbitant price for it, reach out and get Whisky Island.
Which, by the way, is the name of a documentary from, I want to say, the 60s, mid-60s or so. It was this documentary that talked about turning Islay into a tourist attraction because of whiskey. And in that movie, and it was actually David Blackmore of Glenmore and Jean Ardbeg who sent this movie to me, and I think in part because Ardbeg, plays a bit of a role in it. But one of the interesting scenes in that movie, and you can find it on YouTube. It's not, you don't have to rent it or anything like that. One of the interesting things is you see a scene where they're loading up a boat with casks, and there's a malt mill cask on that boat. Absolutely,
I know exactly what you're talking
amazing.
about.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Was that out the 60s? For me, Isla just stands in 1955. Like, just every time I think about Isla, like even I was there last year, I just think 1955 when I think Isla.
Yeah, but this was color, or parts of it were in color, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know if color existed in 1955.
On Isla.
On Isla, at least. Before we start talking about the subject at hand, which is India's Paul John Distillery out of Goa, through the lens of our conversation with Shilton Almeida, I had a question about your shirt. Is that a Run DMC shirt?
It's not, no. It's every year Harrisonburg has a glow run on New Year's Eve. And so the gun goes off at 5 p.m. It's dark, it's cold, and then you run a 5K with everybody ahead of the festivities. Yep.
All right.
Yep. And so that's why it says run in really large letters, but everything else is the opposite.
Okay.
However, you just received some terrible news about Run DMC the other day. You were asking me this in one of our many FaceTime meetings during the week.
I know, because here I am on Facebook, and I see this article, and it says, 2 men arrested, suspected of having killed Jam Master Jay. And I thought, Jam Master Jay has been killed, and you informed me that happened a long time ago.
Long time ago, yeah.
I have
at least towards the beginning of coronavirus and COVID lockdown.
Oh, okay. So it's not like years ago.
Oh, it's years ago. I'm making a joke about time no longer existing.
Oh, you're cracking and making a funny.
Data, do you even know what a joke is?
Of course I do. It is a witticism, a gag, a bon mot, a fluctuation.
Stop.
Making a funny. What am I to you, a clown?
Are you telling me one of your comedies again? So listen. My gosh, between Jam Master Jay and Simon Pegg movies and the woman who I think does stuff with Ricky Gervais now.
Yeah. Actually got me thinking peeing could be the 21st century version of laughing.
A lot messier, though.
Well, throw down some plastic sheets and away you go.
Yeah, and you know what? Maybe make a dossier that you hide afterwards. Anyway.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice.
What's interesting to me is Amrut has really, really taken on the lion's share of representing Indian single malt. Mm-hmm. And I feel pretty confident now, and certainly when you and I had an Amrut bottling, I felt pretty confident in bringing up Amrut to many, many, many people. And it had at least been heard of, even if it hadn't been tried. And I remember first hearing about Paul John, this Goa single malt, and then being in the Cadenhead's warehouse in Campbelltown, and there being a single cask of Paul John there. And I want to say it was maybe 6, maybe 7 years old. With part, do you remember what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I believe me. I have 3 bottles of that. Yeah.
So was it 6 or was it 7?
You keep talking. I'm gonna look.
Okay. So and part of that maturation happened in Scotland, but it was one of those moments where you know what it's like when you spend your time getting to know kind of the big name in town, and then you see, a new kid on the block, so to speak. And that was Paul John. And then tasted it straight from the cask. And it was so wonderfully lively and vibrant and interesting. And this is going to sound like, I think this is quite an embarrassing point to make. It didn't taste anything like Amrut. And I think it's one of those things, we're so busy in Scotland and so busy in Ireland and so busy in America, focusing on all the points of difference amongst all the distilleries. And then somebody comes along and says, oh yeah, this is Indian single malt. And I think it's too easy for the brain to autofill and think, oh, Indian single malt is all of a likeness. And I think it's really, tremendous to be able to get out now. And now, obviously, and this is the way this often happens, I'm seeing more and more people talking about Paul John. Partly, I think it's the overseas growth of Paul John, but I also think, and we've said this many times, I think Cadenheads, and I'm guessing it was Mark Watt who was with them at that point, did a tremendous job helping to spread the word of Paul John.
100%. And so, by the way, I went to my shelf. I think I've got two different ones because this one is a 6-year-old distilled in 2011. So we would have gotten this in 2017. I think there's a 7-year-old as well that we got in 2018. And what I think it was the same parcel because they bought a larger parcel sort of all vatted together and then filled a few different casks, like refilled casks to do extra maturation in Scotland. And so I think I have a 6-year-old and I have a 7-year-old. I will tell you, however, that I don't think it can be discounted the work that our friend Ajay Boja, and hopefully I pronounced his last name right.
Yeah, a great point with a terrible pronunciation.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly, right? So Ajay in the U.S., he's no longer with Paul John. I think he parted ways with them in either late 2018, early 2019, somewhere around there. He was one guy working the entire U.S. market, pimping Paul John, doing every show, every smart show, right? And doing seminar after seminar and bar, takeovers and you name it. He was an absolute champion. And so I got to know about Paul John through Ajay and fell in love with Paul John because of Ajay. And then we went to Scotland, and then I got to see all of the work that Cadenheads had been doing with Paul John.
And then to Shilton, who has done, I think, what Ajay was doing US side for UK and rest of the world. UK, Europe, gets home to Goa. Bit like myself, used to be a little bit more, and then something happened in 2020 where we're not getting home as much. But dashed if I can work out what that is.
Yeah. You know what? There might be a video about it. We could watch it together. It'll be like a COVID watching. You know what I mean?
I'm waiting for the DVD. So during the lockdown, actually, funny we are talking about this. Nothing else to talk about when we're not going anywhere, traveling anywhere. During the lockdown in the United Kingdom, Shilton really occupied Instagram, and we touch on it a little bit in the interview. But it was great seeing him crop up in the feed, and somebody who was just trying to entertain himself, entertaining people on his feed, and just doing silly ass stuff in a really lovely way. So, kudos to him for trying his best to put a smile on people's faces at a time when there was a lot of uncertainty. It's great talking about this for the United Kingdom because their uncertainty is a little more behind them now. So, talked us into a cul-de-sac. I didn't mean to talk us into a cul-de-sac.
You really did. I highly suggest that we hand the mic over to you and me and Shilton.
Checks out.
Yeah, this way we can shut you up and hear you again, just in a different conversation. For those who are not familiar with Paul John and what you guys are doing in Goa, I wonder if you could give a little history of the distillery, how it started, what you do, and then we can go from there.
Sure. So Paul John, the distillery is based in Goa on the west coast of India. We're just 10 kilometers away from the sea. It started off by I would say, a dream project by Mr. Paul P. John, who came up with a company in 1992. John Distilleries started making whiskeys, rum, brandy for the Indian market till 2008, when he said, why don't I start a single malt by myself when you have everything in India, as in the ingredients like barley, water. Why don't we start off? And that's how it started setting up. And the whole idea was passed on to Michael, our master distiller, who set up the distillery in 2008. 2009 is when we started distilling. And 2012 is when we launched the first single malts in the UK.
Okay.
As we were discussing before, it's a lot of people would say, well, I'm here for 5 years now in the UK, and a lot of guys will come to me and say, I didn't ever knew India makes a single malt. But the history goes back in the 18th century with the British in India, and that's how it started from there.
Wait, so there was, obviously I know of the long history of the British and India, but I wasn't aware of single malt production in India that early on.
Yeah.
Do you know who that was? Are there records of that?
Yeah, it was in the British Raj in the 18th century, a man, Edward Dyer, he set up a brewery up north in the foothills of Himalayas. That's basically, that was the British summer camp because of the weather's foothills of Himalayas. And that's where the first brewery was set up. It's the oldest distillery today in Asia. And I just figured out, or I think they already launched single malt again now. But that was in the 18th century. But then after independence, the production of whiskey was hampered because there wasn't enough barley for people to eat. So, why do you want to make whiskey? And that's when people started turning to other resources, and that's how molasses came in the picture. So most of the whiskeys in India, as you know, are based out of molasses spirit.
Right.
Until Amrut started in 2004 and Paul John now in 2012. And there are many more which are coming up as well.
So with the whiskey that's made from molasses, I guess anywhere else in the world, we would probably refer to that as rum because rum is a molasses-based drink. But in India, it seems the laws are different to allow whiskey to be used in that particular situation?
Yeah, it's either molasses or even grain spirit being used by many producers. The laws have changed in the last two years, I guess, where it's been all controlled to call it as a single malt or whiskey, but still it will be saying as whiskey made in India, and it will be also saying on the label itself that it's been blended by Scotch malt on it. So how much Scotch goes in the blend? that's something to figure out.
Wow, that's interesting. Obviously that doesn't get outside of India, but do you personally, do you find that problematic? Would you like to see a change in the laws that make things more clear for the people of India?
Yeah, it should be. I think it is. Well, as I said, it has been changed recently. But then there are different market segments as well, Joshua. To understand, there is economy segment whiskies which you will get for about £2 or £3 for a bottle of 750 ml, and then that's how it will start. It will go up to £5-10 a bottle. And so the biggest consumption is for that segment overall. Today, it's whiskey is one of the biggest. India is one of the biggest drinking consumption market in the world, but most of it is that segment for that range of whiskies being drank.
When you were saying in 1992, you've got the beginnings of Paul John. In 2012, you launched that first single malt. I was reading the Malt Whiskey Yearbook entry for Paul John, and it talks about this extra neutral spirit that was being produced.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen that term before. I've seen neutral spirit, but what was going on with extra neutral? Was there an ingredient? Was there a distillation method? What was the deal with extra neutral?
Well, as I said, the laws have changed. One of the brand that we have is what Mr. Paul started was with original choice. which original choice is uses molasses-based spirit, and extra neutral alcohol is about 95 or 96% ABV, if I'm not wrong. Which is then watered down and comes down by adding flavors and colors to that. Get it down to 42.8.
I'm with you.
Yeah, and the original choice is a brand which is, if you look at the top selling spirits in the world, well, look at the top 20, you will see that at number 5, this brand sells 1 million cases a month.
A month?
A month. And that's to 9-liter cases as well.
Oh my!
You had my attention at 1 million cases. When you threw in month, you blew my mind.
So,
holy moly!
So for our listeners who maybe don't understand the term 9-liter case, that means it's a 12 bottle case or 12 750 milliliter bottles, and that's 1 million of those cases per month.
Yeah. The biggest success of that brand was we came out just because of the way people were drinking and how you could just go to the retail store and buy a miniature of the whiskey. We're the first brand who came out with a whiskey in a Tetra Pak.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's like a little juice
box. It's like
box.
a little juice box. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it doesn't come with a straw, though.
All right.
And you're not allowed to put it in your packed lunch.
No. If you look at the pricing of that is 30 rupees. That's less. That's about 50 cents.
Okay.
So that's how.
Wow. And what was the volume on the box?
That's 90 ml. This one's at 90 ml at 42.8 ABV. So,
that's 3 ounces for 50 cents.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'll get you where
there are different sizes in that, and but that's what sells at 1 million cases a month. Even if you look at the entire list, which there was one out in February, I think. The second biggest is Officer's Choice as a whiskey, and another Indian whiskey, which sells 35 million cases a year.
Okay.
So much.
So just about 3 million a month. Holy moly, those are incredible volume, absolutely incredible. I want to come back to Paul John and kind of the 2012 and the story of the malt.
Yep, good.
But first of all, I'd like to get your story. Like, what got you started? What was your life growing up like in India, and where did your spark come from for single malt? And then they made you move all the way to England, and I am sorry to hear that, Shilton. That's not easy on anybody.
No.
But yeah, give us a bit about you.
Yeah, so I'm born and brought up in Goa. I started off in the hospitality industry before. Because Goa being a tourist destination, that's more what I was into. And my first time I moved out was in 2006, where I moved to the Middle East, and I was working for travel retail at the airport. This is where it got me into whiskeys, and I would say it's all curiosity. Because if you're working in the Middle East and you're selling whiskeys, most expensive whiskeys, but you can't try any of them. You're making people buy them. You're telling the story about it. You're telling the tasting notes and everything, but you actually don't know if it's true.
Wow.
So that got me into reading stuff and learning about how it has been done and talk about it just by and sharing with different people. Till 2012 is when I moved down to Goa and joined the distillery. And walking around in the distillery, I was like, okay, so I had seen this in the pictures. This is how it is made.
So that's what a still looks like. That's a line.
That's how it is.
I'm with
you. And 2012, I was working in Goa in the Goan market for Paul John. That's even before it was launched in Goa. because we had the wines. We also do premium wines in India. So that was the portfolio that I was working with. And 2015 is when I moved to the UK, looking after UK market first. And now I look after Northern European markets for the brand.
Wow. So what was that like coming?
Exactly. I don't know. Just as you said, I don't know why did I move to the UK? But especially with the weathers, I'm like...
You had enough of the sun?
Exactly.
You were like, I need something a bit wetter, a bit damper, a bit grayer. I know, I'll move to England. That'll treat me. So what's England like for you? That's
It's I live in London. So I'm just outside Heathrow Airport. That's how easy I would say. That's because of the traveling part of it. It makes my life easier. You can just 20 minutes to the airport and take a flight, and So although I live here now, since I look after European markets, I'm not much in London, to be honest with you.
Sure. How often do you get home to go over a normal year? Once
or twice a year, to be honest. I would do once a year when we have our annual sales meet, and then mostly during December for the holidays. So, yeah.
Okay.
My friends and family
it's been one.
Yeah, their friends and family back in India, in Goa for us. But I've still got some friends back from Goa who work here. So keep meeting up with them and hanging around.
It's one of the things I've thoroughly enjoyed with our company is in a normal year, getting home 4 or 5 times a year, getting to see my mum, getting to see my brother, getting to see friends over there. It's nice to know that's available. Yeah. And one of the hardest things of this lockdown is thinking, for the rest of 2020, there's no way I'm getting home. Then what's 2021 looking like? Will I get home in any part of that? So I didn't quite realize how much I relied on getting home until I couldn't go home. But I wouldn't move back home. I do like the sun. I do like warm temperatures. I do like not being rained on 7 days a week.
No, I miss home, and a lot of people will say, Shilton, do you plan of going back to Goa, at some point in the future? Yeah, definitely.
I thought it might be rude to ask that question in the interview, and so I avoided it. So I'm glad you volunteered it from other people. Hey, welcome to the country. Yeah, when are you going home? It's got a certain connotation to it.
No, especially with the weathers here, and this is the longest I think in the last 5 years I've been in the house. 3 months in the house, especially for a person like me who's been traveling most of the time, and 3 months in the house. But I did well. I was okay. And so, if someone says many times during interviews, someone will say, Shilton, how are you doing with the lockdown? It must be very different for you. I'm like, well, I stayed 5 years in the Middle East, so I'm okay with this.
Yeah, you've taken to Instagram during this lockdown as well. We see a lot of very fun things coming from you, where some days I'm like, oh, he's having a good laugh, and then other days I think he might be losing his mind. We might need an intervention. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, I do feel it. It was just, again, working. I was all this while it was work from home, but there's nothing much because of, businesses being shut down, and there's no much emails as well to respond back to. And this is when I was like, okay, let me look at this, and I will just go out and find the right content to make it nice and funny and put it together. And there are so many stuff there, but the right one, to be very creative and be funny on the same time. Yeah, no, it's something that is one of the things, and I never thought of doing it, but then me and my friend got together, and we just opened up a YouTube channel as well. So that's something where we just pull in, just like how we are doing this. We pull in a musician from Goa, and bring him online as well, and we go live with it. So it's kind of fun.
Oh.
Oh, fantastic.
That is very
what's the name of the YouTube channel, or how can we find the YouTube channel?
It's just called as Goan Tunes with a Tipple. So Goan Tunes.
Goan Tunes with a Tipple.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's we've done. It's been 30 days actually today. It's been 30 days today. It's been a month for a channel. We've done about 7 episodes. It's something which we thought, because my friend is a musician, and it's like he comes up with this music video, but nobody knows their story. So we said, you know what, let's bring him on and listen to their story of how he came up with his entire music journey and stuff like that.
That's awesome. Oh, yeah, we'll Goan Tunes with a Tipple.
Yeah,
Yep.
Definitely
look
check
at
that out.
Personally,
With a tipple.
personally speaking, seeing your videos has brightened my day every time. I'll be on Facebook or whatever, and I'm scrolling, politics, ugh. Whiskey bottles, yep, I've seen enough whiskey bottles, move on. Cats, okay, I like cats.
Baking, don't miss the baking part of it.
Yeah, right?
Sourdough.
and then I see your video and I say, hold on, I've got to pause. I need to pay attention to this because I need a smile, right? So you've helped keep me sane, and I appreciate that.
No, I got some very good feedback on that, and that's the whole idea. I mean, if I can put a smile on somebody, then that's making my day. Like it's worth putting up that video, and someone says, Shilton, you made my day, and it's like I enjoyed it, and that makes me happy because it looked like, okay, it's worth putting up that video up.
So,
Yeah, well done.
I want to get back again to Paul John in 2000, that year of 2012, and you moving to London in 2015. So here you are in London in 2015, is now 2020. Across those 5 years, how have you seen your markets evolve along with Paul John? Was it very difficult at the beginning? Are you finding it easier now, or maybe just a bit before COVID? Like, how has your job changed as Paul John has grown in popularity and notoriety, etc.?
Well, it has changed a lot. When I came in 2015 over here, we were having I remember it was all I had, the data with me was about 23 or 30 accounts which had Paul John listed. And then if you look at it today, we are on about 250 or 300 accounts. Wow. So in this 5 years' time, that's how it has grown widely. Talking about a brand being accepted as well, because it was me. I mean, now I've got a colleague, Craig, who looks after the UK market. But before that, it was just me running around the country with a bag full of whiskeys and knocking doors. It has changed a lot. Ddoing shows or tastings across the UK, which I started moving around. You will get people saying, I never thought India will make whiskey, or I never knew about this. This is new to me. Or maybe saying, I only heard of one brand before, but I don't know you guys. And then me, introducing them to the brand. From there, if you look at it today, you'll see very familiar faces coming to you and come back and say, hey, Shilton, how are you? I've tried the Brilliance. Can I try the Bold? Or, I have a bottle of this. Someone gifted it to me. I've tried it. It's a lovely whiskey. Can I try the range? So people are, getting we are getting a very positive feedback, and people want to try more and more. Sometimes there are people who come to you and say, oh, I've tried your range. Do you have something new? We can't be having new every festival. So it has.
I only saw you 6 weeks ago.
It has changed a lot, and plus even we have expanded the range as well now. So that's to have a different whiskey for the people.
So frame the range for us. That's another thing I was covering in my research there. There's peated, there's unpeated, there's cask strength, there's not cask strength. Did I even see a 46 and a 40? So can you just frame that for us, please?
So we have an entry-level whiskey, which is called as Nirvana, which is just came out in the UK actually 1 year back, which is at 40% ABV. again, it's more of a stepping stone to the range, or more of entry level. If someone is new to the whiskey, that will be something to start.
Sure.
After that, we have the flagships. The flagships are 3 of them, all 3 at 46% ABV. Brilliance, which is unpeated. Edited, which is lightly peated. And then there is Bold, which is peated.
Okay.
After that, we had the Select Cask, which are 55% ABV. So they are big-bodied whiskey, which one is unpeated and the other, which is classic. And then there is peated, as in the name itself is peated Select Cask, which is a peated whiskey. And we have just recently launched 2 new expressions, which you can see at the back, are the Oloroso and PX, which are very new. It came out over here somewhere in February, March, but we didn't get much time to take it out for festivals because of what's going on. But
Wait, is
Oloroso
something going
and
on?
PX. Yeah, something. We're just losing tracks of days, I guess. I don't even know if it's a Monday or a Tuesday today.
Yes.
Right.
So we have the Oloroso and the PX adding to the range. That is at 48%. This is the range, and plus we have limited editions coming in every time. We have a Christmas edition which comes out during December. Then we have the Zodiac series which we had launched, or maybe a single cask.
Okay, so lots of things going on and lots of ways to explore the brand as well.
Yeah.
How would you? One of the things we like to do, as independent bottlers presenting casks, we'll often talk about a distillery house style. And I know what I've got in my mind whenever I think of Paul John. When you're doing tastings or you're pouring at festivals, how do you describe the house style of Paul John?
Okay, it's if you look at the range itself, as I said, they're all different whiskies. Michael, our master distiller, wanted to create something which is very unique and different compared to any other whiskey. If I had to just pour one whiskey from the range, if someone comes to me, many times you find people saying, "Oh, can I just try one?" I will go for the classic Select Cask, which is unpeated, a lot of tropical fruits, a bit of saltiness in it because we are very close to the sea, so you get a lot of this salty character coming out from the whiskey. And classic will be the one because of Goa, tropical fruitiness coming in.
Okay, that's my exact takeaway for Paul John is it's got those lovely, delicious, rich tropical fruits.
Yeah.
And so, finding releases that harken back to that aspect is really key for me right now. And I know, one thing that we've thoroughly enjoyed was the Paul John that went Cadenheads. And
exactly.
For that reason, it was just so rich, unctuous, tropical, really, really delicious. I poured it for my Whisky Society that I run up in the Palouse. They were floored. It was their first experience of Paul John, and they were absolutely floored by it. So it's great to hear things like that.
The Cadenheads one, I don't know if which one is the one you had. If it's the tall bottle,
one, right?
Yeah, it was the warehouse selection in the square bottle.
Okay. That's the warehouse.
Yes, I saw it over your shoulder earlier as well.
The warehouse selection one is this was a batch. I think it was 25 casks wetted together, so it's not even a single cask. So it was a batch sent across to Cadenheads, and very funny enough, that was the first time we were sending something like that. And instead of sending IBC containers, which we do now, this one was sent in generic bottles. So imagine you're sending them in bottles, just normal bottles, and then the guys at Cadenheads have to empty all of them in the cask. So that's a lot of work to do.
Wait, 25 casks worth of whiskey. So assume 200 bottles times 20. That is a lot.
No. Much more, I guess.
Oh, wow. 200 bottles per cask.
200 bottles per cask.
If they were filling it to the level, you could be looking at 250.
Oh my gosh. That's fantastic. So I remember going to the Cadenheads warehouse and tasting from that cask, tasting it blind, and it was. Were you with me, Jason, or was that on a different trip?
I wasn't.
You weren't?
Nope, I wasn't.
Okay. And so I was with Mark Watt and with Cameron, and we're tasting things blind. And I've got to say, I am absolutely shit when it comes to tasting anything blind. I can't. I can name Springbank maybe, and that's it. But they poured me the Paul John, and I'm nosing it, I'm tasting it, and I said, okay, I don't think that this is Scotch whiskey. There's something else going on that I hadn't tasted in any single malt I'm familiar with. And they said, you're good. Yep, this is not. And then they said, can you figure out who it is? I said, no, I can tell you it's not Scotch whiskey, but I can't tell you who it is. But I can tell you that I love it. And so they told me it was a Paul John, and I think I may have bought 6 bottles, off the bat. But what struck me about this, and it gets to what you were saying, how your distiller, Michael, wanted to create something that was totally different, and this was totally different to anything that I've tasted. Obviously a single malt, but totally different. Now, you had mentioned all of your ingredients are 100% from India. Can you talk about your ingredients and how they create your flavor profile, how they construct the DNA of your whiskeys?
The barley that we use is we don't grow it down in Goa. So that's only up north at the foothills of Himalayas, basically. Okay. And Rajasthan is the place where we source the barley from. I will say, if you look at Rajasthan, if you just Google up and see, Rajasthan is a desert. Okay, and that's where you get the best quality barley. That's another surprising factor there.
Wow.
The barley grows in Rajasthan, and we ship it down. So the barley is very different. When I say different, we use 6-row barley. And we don't use the 2-row barley for our whiskies, all of them.
So 6-row is like a beer. I think beer barley is also a 6-row. Okay.
Yeah, it's also called as beer barley as well. That's what we use, and that's, again, it's more huskier. The 6-row barley is very high on protein and low on starch. So, even if you try a new make coming from Paul John, it's nice and fruity and lighter. You can, soft on the palate. And that's how, even if you look at the whiskeys, which we have in Paul John, even at 46%, it's quite creamy and oily character, which you'll find in the character. That's even if you look at the one you tried in the Karen Hits one as well. It's got that creamy characters, sweet texture.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's where we get the barley from, and we take it down to Goa, where it's been distilled, matured, and bottled in Goa itself. Mm-hmm. The water itself is from Goa. We only 2 things that come from out of India will be the cask, of course, American oak, and to make the peated whiskey, we ship the peat over from Scotland.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is it? I imagine it's Highland peat and not Islay peat.
So we ship it from 2 different regions in Scotland. One is Islay and Highland, and also from the Highlands. So if you look at Bold, which is the flagships, at 46%, we use only Islay peat here in that one.
Oh,
so
interesting.
It's quite in. If you look at if you try the Bold itself, you'll get on the nose itself, you'll get that peaty character coming out. But at the same time, you will find that Paul John fruitiness coming in as well. So it's a combination of both. It's not even heavy peated, but it's kind of, a lot of people say, I don't like peated whiskey, but I can, this is something which I can go for, kind of a thing. Because it's, at the same time, it maintains the Paul John DNA in it, which is that sweet, fruity character coming out. And the peated select cask, which is at 55, which is more, which uses a peat from both the regions, but more on the highlands. So we'll find that more of that earthy maritime character rather than the Islay style of it.
Yeah, sure. To maintain or retain, I should say, the fruity style of your whiskey, are you doing anything special in your fermentation? Are you doing extra long ferments to increase fruity or floral characteristics? What do you do with your distillation? Do you have specific cuts you look for to try to target certain flavors?
A few different things what Michael does will be, if you look at the pot stills as well, the line arms, they go higher for us rather than going down. That's to interact, for more interaction with the copper.
Yeah.
So that it's 100% Indian copper as well. It's been made in India. Wow. The pot stills as well. So it's nothing that comes out, doesn't come out. Fermentation, again, Michael does it for 72 hours.
Okay. Yep.
So 60 plus, it left for another 10 hours or so, just so that you get that more intense character coming out from it. So it just leaves it over there for another extra 10 hours.
Okay. And I apologize. I'm a typical American who doesn't understand world geography. But is Goa situated in higher altitudes or lower altitudes?
Lower.
Okay.
Lower.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what sort of pressure may affect your overall production. Okay.
I mean, the water source as well, if you look at it, we use natural spring water. I mean, we have, at the distillery itself, we have bore wells where you can just draw the water. For the whiskeys, we use the water from the river close by River Sal. Mm-hmm. And a very classic example is every house, for example, in Goa will be having a well in their compound where you can just draw the water and it's drinking water. So water has never been an issue for us because we are close to the sea.
Okay, and then in distillation, are you, one of the things we always do going around the distilleries in Scotland, and what do you take your head cut at and your heart cut? Are you able to tell us? Is that information that you're willing to share?
Not something which that's something which Michael will be a better person to check with because of the cut, not me. Yeah.
Not a problem. For going into cask, clearly one of the things we know, no matter how poor Joshua is with his geography, one thing we know is that you're seeing a high angel share.
Yeah.
And so when that new make goes in, how quickly are you seeing color on that? How quickly are you getting some of those wood flavors coming in? And then what's the struggle like for battling angel share volume loss versus color versus flavor maturation? What's that whole struggle like?
So again, that's another thing which makes it different, makes us very different in any other whiskey. First of all, the new make that we get is at 63% ABV. So we don't get a higher new make. 63 is straight away filled up. We fill the cask at 63% itself. We have 3 warehouses at the location, out of which one is an underground cellar.
That's right, I heard about this, yes.
This is where it gets more interesting, because when Michael started off, it was like, it's very new, you've never done, you don't know how the whiskey will be. So we just had 2 styles. One is above the ground, and let's have one underground because something will work. That's how we started doing it. But
wow.
The whiskies itself are very different when it comes out. If you try the classic select cask, for that we use whiskies which are from the underground cellar. We have a total of about 17,000 casks today.
Wow.
3,500 are underground. So there's not much of a temperature difference in both. It's 23 and 25 degrees only.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, at the warehouse. But
between underground and overground?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
23 and 25 centigrade?
Yeah, centigrade. So there's not much of a difference between two. But I think, but the main thing is the ones above the ground will be more in contact with the saltiness in the air because of the humidity. The humidity shoots up to 60, 70. I mean, I think it was even 95 a few days back. So that's how humid it can get in Goa. Angel share, yeah.
You're just swimming through the air at that point. Like that's just.
It's funny. It's funny. I lived 5 years in the Middle East, but then I was still okay. But then every time I used to go down for a vacation into Goa, I'm like, I'm feeling hot. I can't take this hit. So the angel share itself, we have 8 to 10% angel share.
Okay.
So you lose a lot of whiskey. That's how with the samples as well. Whenever we are doing if we get a sample of a single cask for any indie bottler coming across, the pressure is that it will change in 3 months' time. The liquid changes, and you can't leave it for a long time in the cask, because then by the time you bottle it, the liquid will be something different, and someone will come back and say, "Well, this is not what I tried." So that happens. That happens with the faster extraction. So the extraction rate for us is 3 to 4 times faster than Scotland.
Sure.
So you get a lot coming out from the wood in a shorter time. But there, as I said, the good thing is that you mature it quicker. You get more flavors coming in quicker. But the bad thing is that you lose a lot of whiskey as well.
Yeah. Given that distillation started 8 years ago, do you have casks that are sitting at 8 years old, or are you losing too much volume? Are you getting too much wood influence in that time? What is Paul John like as it's getting older?
So it is the range that we have. There's no age statement on it, but most of the whiskies are somewhere about 6 to 8 years old, which are bottled. The select casks are selected cask put together, about 100 casks put together in a batch. These are 7 and 8 years old whiskey. Of course, there will be 1 or 2 casks somewhere where Michael wants to see how it's gonna be. After we are not that old. A lot of guys will say, "Will you ever have a 20 years old whiskey?" Well, there won't be much left in the cask to start with.
Right.
Yeah, you can bottle it. It'll look just like this.
So that is something which is losing a lot of whiskey as with the evaporation. 8 to 10% is we do, but there's a good thing about it as well, that you mature it quicker. That's exactly what has happened with the one you tried with Cadenhead as well, because it's been 5 years old. It's a 5 years old whiskey matured in Goa, and then they leave it for another year or 2 in Scotland,
right?
In another cask. So something very interestingly, what will happen there is it got a lot of extraction done in Goa, but once you leave it in another cask in Scotland with the colder climates, it gets more time for the flavors to marry and react. So that's how the one you tried. My bottle is going down too fast as well. So that's nice and creamy and juicy kind of a whiskey, where it's feel like drinking more of it.
Yeah, it goes down very easily. Very easily.
Do you find a different? I understand there's just a 2-degree difference between underground warehousing and above ground warehousing, right? 23 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees Celsius. Do you find that subtle change in temperature affects how your whiskey matures? Do you find the flavor profiles to be different enough?
Yeah, I mean, every cask is different as well. We don't have to. Michael doesn't move the cask, rotate it, but it's been revisited after every 6 months' time, just to check on and keep a track on the profile. Because 17,000 cask we have today, which is going to be 20 soon. 17,000 cask revisiting after every 6 months is not easy as well. And checking them. So I wonder how much he's been tasting every day to keep. So it's we do it as you said. Every cask will give us a different profile. We used to earlier use a lot of Jack Daniel cask before, because what Michael thought was that will give the right profile, because Jack Daniel, as they are big in production,
sure.
And then it's easy to get their cask. But recently we have with the tie-up with Sazerac, we have sourced some Buffalo Trace as well. So that's a new cask which have been just shipped across into India.
Yeah, and so I was going to ask this question. Is there a cooperage that you work with in India, or when you receive casks, you're receiving them still full, still intact, with a little bit of liquid in them?
There's no liquid in that, but it's all intact as it is. The only thing is that we redo it sometimes if it is damaged or, that's all. But we don't have a full cooperage at the on-site.
Okay. But you've got someone on site who can do minor repairs and things like
that. Yeah. That is going on. I mean, as and when there is some damage or repairing work done, then there is a guy who does it, but not the full cask. They all come in intact as full.
Got it. I was thinking the other day about we've got a friend, Raj Sabarwal, who is the importer of Amrut into the U.S. And when he started, just getting labels approved by the TTB here in the U.S. that mentions, the 3 words Indian single malt or Indian single malt whiskey, it confused our government. They simply didn't know what to make of it. And, now he's established the brand. Amrut has become fairly big. Paul John is now becoming fairly big. People are understanding Indian single malt. But I wonder, again, do you still have struggles you go up against? I remember at the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about whiskey in India, and before the laws had changed, it could be made from molasses and be called whiskey. Like, do you ever run into that where people say, are you sure this is whiskey, or that's not even an issue at all these days?
As you said it yourself, the brand has grown a lot. But it's quite funny if there's someone who's been to India a long time back and he has tried one of those whiskeys over there. And when I tell him again saying this is an Indian whiskey, he said, oh no, I've tried an Indian whiskey before, I don't want to try another one. But then it will be more about explaining, okay, well, you have tried something else and you have not tried this one. So this is a single malt, and then, explain the whole process. But people have heard about it, about the molasses-based spirit used, and a lot of guys do know. Some of them will say, I don't want to try it at all straight away. But then you need to explain, saying this is a single malt, and it's done very differently. It's not the same thing what you had tried before.
Yeah, it reminds me of Japanese whiskey, before 2013, right? Before Jim Murray made his big statement about Yamazaki sherry cask, and I was drinking Japanese whiskey in the mid to late 2000s, and I would tell people about the whiskey, and they would say, "What is that? Made from rice?" And they would say it in a way that was negative. And now everybody knows Japanese whiskey. It's become the biggest thing that there is. So it's nice to see that people can evolve past that. But it either takes a name like Jim Murray or just hard work from good people like yourself, just being out in front of everybody, pouring whiskey in glass, saying, shut up, stick your nose in the glass, take a sip, you're going to love this.
Yeah, it has changed a lot. Definitely, even the Indian market itself, the big thing over there will be a lot of people will be drinking Scotch whiskey before, and it's imported Scotch whiskey. These are the 3 words that people were looking for, which has changed a lot recently. For us itself, India is a big market today. It's growing. And as I said, if you're looking at the numbers itself in India, there is a big scope there. So the market has grown from what it was before. It's a growing market for us, but again, it was, as you said, it was more about imported Scotch whiskey. I still remember I was doing a tasting in Goa itself, and my professor who was in there, he said, "Oh, Shilton, you're working for this brand now. It's a lovely whiskey, but I can't buy it and take it home for my functions at home." I said, "Why? What's wrong with that?" "Oh no, when my guests come in, they will say, 'Why are you giving us a local brand? Why not an imported Scotch whiskey?'"
Yeah.
I never knew what this is something which is very new as well as a Glencairn glass. It's not something which is used everywhere. I saw this glass first time when I started working with the distillery and moved over here. But something which is not, it's more about drinking culture as well. It's whiskey and it's like a highball, whiskey and soda water.
Okay.
That's the trend.
So is it partly enjoying the taste of the alcohol, but then also looking for refreshment?
It's more about, I would say it's a lot about refreshment, soda water or on the rocks. Even if you go up with the bottle and give it to someone, and he'll say, "Oh well, I'll have it with a Coke as well." That's because of what they have been drinking. It's just a culture. And then you explain to them, well, you know what, try it out over here this way first. And I know my friends living over here in London from Goa itself. Even if I sit down with them with a bottle of Paul John, they'll be like looking for the Coke to pour in. I said, no, you better buy something else, not this one.
Yeah, if you want this friendship to continue, you'll put the Coke in its own glass, please.
Yeah, I'm over here pouring Paul John is because I can talk to you about the brand and tell you about it and enjoy the flavors. I mean, you can have it, but then let's have something else instead. Or maybe when I'm not in the room.
That's interesting to me, though, listening to you talk. We're asking you the questions about, well, what's the international market looking like? And we hear the struggles in the US and the UK. It's interesting for you within Goa to be trying to overcome the dismissal of a local whiskey. And again, for Joshua and I sitting here in the United States, there's such a push towards local. There's such a push to knowing your beer maker, whiskey maker, farmer.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that there's still that reputation around imported Scotch whiskey that would fly in the face of. But this is made right here. You could take ownership of this distillery right here. It's really interesting to hear you tell that story, Shilton.
There are many brands. I mean, just to name a few, Black and White and Vet 69, for example, are big brands in India today. I don't see a Vet 69 in the UK itself nowadays. It's so difficult to find a bottle of that over here on the shelf. But they are big brands in India. They sell a lot in the local market. So it's quite educational for us as a brand as well to get people into telling them about and making them try and do tasting sessions. But the brand has picked up a lot now. I mean, Nirvana as well as an entry level at that 40% is the top seller, I will say, right now in India. So there are many factors, price conscious market as well. So you have to look at the pricing of what you get to. You definitely can't get people converting from £1 a bottle and make them buy a £30 a bottle. That's not happening in a day's time.
It's a big ask. It really is a big ask. Just to pivot back to something we were talking about within the line and the sherry additions. One of the questions I wanted to ask at the time, but I didn't. Now it's still reverberating. Are those finishes? Are those full maturations? Given what we've talked about with the rate of maturation, I can't imagine it takes very long to pull a lot of sherry out of the wood. And so can you talk to those a little bit for us?
Yep. So the two new ones which are out here are...
I've also been looking at them over your shoulder, and so the question has not gone away.
7 years old. So 5 years in American Oak and 2 years in Oloroso for this one.
As much as 2 years, okay.
Yeah, 2 years for that. 2 years, yeah. That color for 2 years is a lot coming out because of the extraction. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
We had done one before. Michael had tried one sherry cask just to see when he started, and it was filled with a 4 years old liquid. Left it for 3 years, and we got 252 bottles out of it, which was shipped across one cask only. So it went out globally.
Wow.
And it was sold out. So this is something which we had tried and see how it works for Paul John, and seeing that it was well accepted and people liked it, and that's how we ended up getting more of Oloroso and PX.
Okay. Was that pulled from a hogshead?
Yes,
and you're talking about 200 some bottles being left. Okay.
There are 252 bottles. That was a sherry butt. It's a 30 years old sherry butt.
Oh, it was a sherry butt.
Yeah.
Was it filled to the top? Was it completely filled? It couldn't have been completely filled.
It should be, because it was filled with. It was left in there for 3 years' time. That's pretty much
an amazing amount of loss from that sherry butt. Holy cow.
That was just to see and how it works. It's something which is to see how the liquid from at our distillery will work. I don't think there are any intentions of doing a full sherry maturation with the way it goes in. It should be mainly with the finishes. That's what we are planning. So we have just sourced some virgin oak as well. So Michael is working on virgin oaks, and there are some Portuguese wine cask as well some port that he's working on as well.
It'll be interesting. When you mentioned the new oak, it certainly makes me think of conditions in Kentucky. And Kentucky, in the height of the summer, can experience angel share loss around what you're describing. In Goa, is your climate, is it plateau for the full 12 months of the year? Do you have peaks and troughs in your climate? Could you just describe it for my own
there are 4 seasons that we go through, and with the temperatures, it's like it gets hot, it gets hotter, and then it gets hottest, kind of a thing.
So just like Scotland. Okay, I'm following.
No, we
get wet and then wetter and then wetter. Okay,
but there are 4 seasons. I mean, it will be now it is monsoon when it's heavy rains there. Then October, November, December will be getting, we call it as winter, for 19 degrees and 20 degrees. So that's that's why November, December is a time when a lot of tourists will come into Goa as well for that climate.
Yeah.
So 19, 20, and March, April, May is summer. So that's very hot, temperatures going up to 40 degrees and with a humidity of 90. That's so it keeps changing. The weathers the temperatures keep changing for us.
Yeah, I was in Tel Aviv last year, and then we went to the Dead Sea as well. I was with the good people at Milk and Honey.
Tal and the guys,
with the Tal and all them, and it was June. And so in Tel Aviv, it was anywhere between 35 and 38 degrees. And I think the humidity was at around 7 million, somewhere around there. I could be wrong. And then down in the Dead Sea, it was about 45 degrees. And it was just, you could see, I think they call it the Dead Sea because so many people died. From heat exhaustion there. But I have a question.
Let me just quickly throw this in. I've had a tour group on Arran in September, and it has been 16 degrees centigrade, 16. Yeah. And we have all collectively said, this is nice. It's really warmed up today, hasn't it? It's really warmed up. And that's 16. The thought of your 19 in the winter just boggles my mind. Absolutely crazy. So, okay, I just wanted to get that comparison out there. So, carry on, Joshua.
So, I did have a question, and hopefully I pose it correctly. I get a lot of people asking me, as an independent bottler, and they say, Joshua, how come you guys focus mostly on Scotch whiskey? You're an American. Shouldn't you be doing more American whiskey? I mean, you're an American, you should have some American pride, and more pride, not American pride, but pride about your spirits made in your country. And my response to them is, I fell in love with Scotch whiskey, and I'm proud of the whiskeys that I've selected with Jason. To me, that's all that matters. I prefer Scotch whiskey. But yourself, having grown up in India and now representing a high-end single malt brand from India, do you have that sense of pride about that spirit being made in your country, and you can be a representative or a spokesperson for that Indian product?
Yes, definitely. And for me, especially me being from Goa itself, it's more about, I get more passionate about it, to be honest. And I think that's my driving force as well. Many times I will listen to this comment saying, Shilton, you travel a lot. Do you ever stay home? That's a lot of things you're doing in a week's time. But then I think that's more about passion, and for me to get out there and talking to somebody about our own local brand, which is made in Goa, and talking about the history and what the place is about. So I get more passionate when I start talking about Paul John, I feel. So yeah, definitely I feel very proud about it. Yeah.
That's fantastic. How is Goa different from other parts of India? Like, is it wildly different? I mean, because you're not the first person I've met from Goa to talk about a pride from being from Goa. So I'm really curious to know.
So Goa is, when someone visits there, it's like you are in India, but not exactly in India. You get that kind of feel. You feel like as if you are somewhere in the Caribbean or somewhere in Europe because of the vibe of it. It has got a lot of Portuguese vibe to it. Mm-hmm. The Portuguese were in Goa till 1961. So that's been from the 15th century till 1961. That's been a long time they have been in India.
Wow. Okay.
And even India, for example, got independence from the British in 1947. But the Portuguese were in Goa till 61. Still there. The culture, the food, the buildings across, they'll find a lot of Portuguese houses which are like 200 years old, Wow. So built by that. So it looks more of the names, as in Almeida, for example, Shilton Almeida, that's Portuguese. Yeah. So you find De Souza, Fernandes, the food again, like fish and pork is big thing. Like chorizo, for example, is a big thing in Goa.
Wow. That's deep influence.
It really is. I grew up, the town that I grew up in, it's a small town, but per capita, it's got the largest Portuguese population in America. And so there's plenty of Almeidas that I've grown up with, and Silvas and De Silva and Sousa and De Sousa.
And there are still a lot of people in Goa who speak Portuguese even today. For example, my grandmother used to speak Portuguese, and there are like old property, old house papers, which if you find one, they will be in Portuguese. Wow. So that's And then you have to literally go out and go for translation. As long as I see my name in it, okay, this is my house, I'm okay with that. That's all I can read. That's all I can read, and I figured out I've got my name on there, I am happy.
Oh, gosh. I realize right now we've taken up about an hour and a half of your time. I had a closing question that I wanted to toss your way, but Jason, I didn't want to cut you off, and also Shilton, I didn't want to cut you off if there's anything you wanted to talk about.
No, I'm good. Yeah, all good.
No, I was going to do what you're about to do, was just start wrapping up in the interest of time.
Perfect. Okay. Now, imagine a world in which we are not being plagued by plagues, right? Where we can travel freely and just rewind the clock a few months as if none of this has ever happened. What are you excited about for Paul John in the future and whiskey from India in the future? Because I know you mentioned there's more distilleries popping up. What has you excited? What are you looking forward to?
For us itself, for Paul John, with the new expressions coming in and with the wider range now, one thing which is quite, I would like to say here, is with the whole range, we have got a whiskey for different palate, if you look at it that way. Mm. There is something which is lighter. We also have lightly peated, and there is peated. So there's a wide, with more options in the range for everybody. With that, with the new sherry additions as well in it, which is for people who like the sweeter character whiskey. So with that, with the Portuguese wine cask coming in finishes, and I'm quite excited to see that. Well, again, I always say the Portuguese were there for a long time in India, but sadly they never left any cask behind for us. So we have to go back to Portugal to get some again. So that's so sad.
You should stay there for a few hundred years and see how they like it.
So there are more exciting things coming up, and I would really like to see the new distilleries as well. Example, Amrut is based in Bangalore, and in Bangalore, and again, different location gives a very different whiskey. There is Rampur coming from up north. The character of that whiskey will be very different because of the it's different style of making anyways. But I will personally like to see more coming out and also trying out different styles and see how it turns up to be.
Thank you, sir.
Just one last little thing that I want to throw in there.
Yeah.
You had mentioned some new distilleries popping up. Do many of them have stock already? Are they selling whiskeys already, or are they still very young and still working on their products?
They are, as per what I understand, the Solon, which was the first distillery which was set up in the 18th century by Edward Dyer. What I have not tried it, but I've come across it that they have launched a single malt already, coming back into the market. But most of these companies have been in the market for a long time, but maybe not making a single malt.
Okay.
For example, us, even at John Distilleries, the same story. We started off in '92 making whiskeys for the Indian market, and then said, let's start a single malt. So that's more, I think that will be everybody's story. Like, they have been in the industry for a long time, but then they started making single malts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I'm pretty excited to see how these things, how the new ones are going to be. It's you can call it a competition if you want to, but it's just I would say it's more about research and finding out.
Yeah. Well, it's the building of an entire category.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so, we as independent bottlers only talk up independent bottlers. If you look at the strengths of regionality in Scotland, what that's done for Speyside, what that's done for Islay, to be able to do that for India first, and then have it become regionality within India, seems like a good thing for everybody.
I mean, it's a big.
There certainly are enough.
It's a big country, and what I would really like to see myself in the market after with the experience, which you don't see much today, is you will find when you look into a bar in the menu, for example, you'll find American whiskeys, you find Scotch whiskeys, and then it says world whiskeys or rest of the world.
Yeah.
I would like to see that as into categories as well, saying Japanese whiskeys or Indian whiskeys, and rather than just saying as world whiskeys in one category. Why world whiskeys? I mean, I think every whiskey is a world whiskey.
Exactly. Yeah.
But there's so many countries coming up. I mean, Sweden, there is Belgium. I mean, there are whiskeys from different countries, and with the way even we are growing as India is coming up with different whiskeys, I will really like to see that as said as Indian whiskey.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed wholeheartedly. Yeah, it's like, for me, and people are saying, oh, Jason, have you seen England's got a distillery?
Yeah.
Do you see Wales has got a distillery? Do you see India has started? Yeah, it's brilliant, fantastic. More, please. Let's keep exploring this rich whiskey world.
Yeah.
And let's represent the entire category with key denotations within that.
It's quite sad. There's another term which is used sometimes is non-Scotch whiskey.
Wow. Yeah, that's a negative connotation.
That's very bad.
Yeah.
I've seen that on a menu sometimes as well.
Yeah, that's terrible. I'd hate to see that. Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That was a lot of fun. Yeah, a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed this conversation pretty much as well. So it was fun to talk with you guys.
Jason, I have a confession to make to you.
Checks out. That's what I said going into the interview. That tracks.
Well, my confession to you is that, I know we're about to drink some whiskey, but I don't have a glass, so I'm going to just drink straight out of my little sample bottle. But before we take this sip of whiskey from A, your glass, B, my sample bottle, I suggest we raise this to the good Shilton Almeida for spending time with us, for talking with us, teaching us about Paul John, and for sending us these cask samples for a future SCN release.
Exactly. Cheers, Shilton.
Cheers, Shilton. So I just want to make sure I'm sipping from the right one. This is Cask 6341. This will be for the U.S. market, and this is peated Paul John. Mm-hmm. Oh, my gosh.
It's so well put together.
Oh, my gosh. So, okay, so Jason, because you have a glass and I don't have one on me, I'm just taking tiny sips from my bottle. I guarantee there's people who are listening to the podcast who may not have experienced Paul John before. Could you go over some tasting notes that you're getting from this to give people an idea of where the flavors lie?
You and I will always talk about spirit-driven house character, house style. One of the things for me with Paul John is there's always a brightness to it. There's always a sweet cereal note that I often think of as a yellow note, right? And I think about those nice, golden ears of barley swaying in the wind. And I can't help but get that on the nose and the palate. This is peated barley, so there is that little bit of smoke going in concert with that sweetness, with that grain. And then there's this little bit of tropical fruit, this additional fruit sweetness coming through. And I'm trying to be careful here because I know I'm saying sweet a lot, but in no way do I find it cloying. And sometimes a sweet spirit can become quite cloying. You don't want to go back to it. I think there's enough framing from the wood in the back of the palate and into the finish that really balances the sweet that comes in on the front end of the palate. And, subtle hints of pepper round about it, just a ground grey pepper, not a freshly cracked pepper or anything like that. But so inviting. It is one of those hard points at which you just get to, it's just freaking delicious, right? You just want to keep sipping it. That to me, you and I talk about this in our sampling sessions, our selection meetings. Do I want to pull this off my shelf? Yeah. Do I want to take another sip of this when it's in my glass?
Yeah.
And this absolutely checks those boxes. And not only because it's something we have selected, but the same is true of the Caneheads bottlings, right? Those are things we pull off of our shelves. We want to revisit that. That peat is just so nice on this. I will add this.
Okay.
Because I did want to point out that there's other things around the sweet notes, and it could just be something you and I have been talking about a lot. But there are fresh hospital bandages, clean hospital bandages, the gauze, the little bit of antiseptic, right? Just around the edges, which is, for me, such a classic peat note.
It is. It's also a note that might turn some people off. So I'm with you. Like, I get that note in a lot of Islay whiskeys, right? Occasionally in some Highland peat notes, but like for me, that is a nice note. That's a familiar note that I look for in peated whiskeys. But would you describe it another way for people who may not be familiar with that sort of scent?
But I think people are familiar with it, right? Look at for years where Lefroy ran with Band-Aids, right? Nobody's thinking about a dirty Band-Aid that's come off a kid's knee and floated to the bottom of a swimming pool, right? Which is, always a horrible place to find a Band-Aid, right? But instead you're thinking about what's the overall smell of your Band-Aid box, right? If you've got kids, you have a Band-Aid box.
Yeah.
And that's where they're pulling their Band-Aids from. Or when you first open the package of Band-Aids, what do you get? And so, fresh hospital bandages, it's that sense of cleanliness, but also with maybe even a little bit of the plastic going on in it, right? Which is now digging a much deeper hole. But it's like being in your doctor's office and they pull out a single-use item out of clean packaging, right? It's a clean, it's a safe aroma.
Okay. Okay. No, I like that. I like that a lot. So for those of you, because I feel as if coming out of that interview, I may have rushed into the tasting of the notes and such. And so in case you missed it, I snuck in a little bit of an announcement there that Single Cask Nation is going to be doing a Paul John release. And what we're tasting right now is the Cask 6341. This is the peated cask for the U.S., but we've selected 2 casks now. One peated for the U.S., one unpeated for the rest of the world. And speaking of the rest of the world, Jason, do you think this might be a good time to maybe bring in the paperboy and talk about some of the things going on for Single Cask Nation, UK, Europe, Asia?
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Boom.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Life story of Playboy Penny! Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it! Me and that Playboy...
Beyond the Paul John, the unpeated Paul John that we will have for UK, Europe, and to be honest, you know, it hasn't shipped from India yet. It's probably going to take a couple months even to get to Scotland. So that will be a 2021 release, to be honest, for both the U.S. cask and the rest of the world cask. But let's set our sights upon 2020. What do we see for UK, Europe, Asia for our 2020 end-of-year releases?
Well, I think some big news that we just got this week is that South Africa has reopened to alcohol importation and even internal sales. And so Mark Pendlebury, who many of our listeners may very well know as Whisky Brother in the Whisky online community, he has acquired a cask of Tennessee whiskey from us.
That's correct. Yeah, we bottled it exclusively for him and his customers. So very excited about that one.
Really excited to get that out the door and on the water and off to South Africa.
Yep.
I think that'll be a real treat for his customers. Yes, selected by him, the notes on the label written by him, real good exclusive partnership with him on that selection.
Yep. And then beyond that, I don't think we mentioned it on the podcast before, but we're now distributed in Germany.
A very exciting development for such a well-known and well-regarded whiskey country. Really excited to be in a very well-known and very well-regarded whiskey country. You know, the Germans love their single malts and their independent bottlers. And
that they do.
So I'm excited. We have our very good friend, Mr. Whiskey Quiz, Jens Fischer, who has been such a wonderful supporter of ours. And we're now in your country, Jens. Take good care of us.
He should know. He's the one who put us onto our distributor. Right? This is the beauty of Single Cask Nation members, of One Nation Under Whiskey listeners. It's so interesting to know that our customers, that our listeners, that our friends are looking out for us. Right? I think that's just phenomenal. On top of the bourbon for South Africa, which will be a South African exclusive, obviously I want to talk about release number 2. And that's release number 2 for UK, Europe, Asia, you know, basically everything other than the US. But I did want to mention to our listeners here that there is still stock left of our Tomatin, our Tianinich, our Craigellachie, our Trinidadian rum, and our blended malt. Those are still available. Our Kalila, however, has completely been sold out.
Wonderful.
Right? And so if anybody is looking for any of we call it our 70 CL series. If anybody's looking for our 70 CL line, 700 milliliter bottlings, you can find it through the Whiskey Exchange, through Master of Malt. I'm sure there's a few other online whiskey shops popping up that you may be able to find us at.
And I don't wish to muddy the water here, but just when you said the 70 CL series, you made me think of this. for those who purchased our Kalila in the 75 CL bottles, the Kalila Sherry Butt that came to the United States, that is also completely sold out.
Well, there you go, too. Yeah, I guess Kalila sells. And that was a
That's what
sherry
we've heard.
butt. Yeah.
Do you remember we did one of our BYO SCNB events and we made reference to the fact that we were being offered a lot of Kalila and we really started turning it down, and a whole bunch of our members said, why would you ever turn down Kalila? You can't bottle enough Kalila for the nation. And we were kind of like, really? Is that a thing? And,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
look, the Kalila's gone from the website. The Kalila's gone from the UK, rest of the world. Yeah, those members, they might know what they're talking about. So
Should we listen
why
to our
don't-
members?
Why don't we get some more Kalila, Joshua?
I guess we should. But unfortunately, we will not have Kalila in release number 2. But here's what we will have, Jason.
Yes, Joshua.
We are going to have a 29-year-old bourbon cask Aberfeldy. When's the last time you saw independently bottled Aberfeldy?
Yeah, been a long time.
Yeah, you and me both. On top of that, we've got some Imperial coming out, some nice younger 20s Imperial coming out, also bourbon cask matured. We're going to have a 9-year-old Kleinlich, which is insanely tasty, just big, fruity, waxy, marvelous little whiskey.
I have some of that sitting right here. I'm going to take a little sip. If the name of the game today is sipping from sample bottles, boy, do I have a little sample bottle to sip from. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's pear drops on the nose. Oh, that's lovely.
We also will have a younger Glen Elgin coming out. And the cherry on the top, I don't know if this is the cherry on the top, but I am kind of excited about it. We have a couple of rums that we're doing. So we're going to have a Brazilian rum from the Apris Distillery. And then, now, Jason, you and I have a really tough time pronouncing this rum distillery's name. So this is a Guianan rum.
James Foster can write in and tell us how to pronounce it properly. So why don't you spell it first? Because spelling it is part of the fun.
Well, I'll get there. So it's a Guianan rum from 1999. And by the way, the Brazilian one was from 2011. So that's a 9-year-old. This Guianan rum is 21 years old. And the distillery is now shuttered. It shuttered in 2000. So this is a 99. So this was a year before it shuttered. And it's spelled UITVLUGT, which we've been saying Oi Gewalt.
That's it. That's our Oi Gewalt rum. Yeah, it's one of those. Whenever I see that collection of letters, I think about Scrabble tiles in your hand that you know the very next turn you're just going to put them back in the bag. You're just going to trade them all in because you're not getting anything out of it. But yeah, it's pronounced something like Oivolt.
Oifolt or something foot. I think it's pronounced Goldfinger. I think that's how it's pronounced. Anyway, and then the very last thing within release number 2 is a grain, and this is an Invergordon from your birth year, Jason, from 1974.
Ahoy! Bazinga!
So there's quite a few whiskeys and a couple of rums too. I think release number 2 is shaping up to be pretty remarkable.
Yep, UK, rest of the world are going to get spoiled with that one. I'm really happy with it. That Clinlish that I just sipped on is absolutely delightful. And if the 9-year-old Clinlish that we released as part of our retail line in the United States last year is any indication, this is going to disappear off shelves. Lickety split.
Lickety split. Okay.
If that concludes the news portion, I have a wonderful email that will provide an absolutely delicious transition.
Ooh, that sounds delicious. It sounds appetizing. How's that? It sounds appetizing.
The wonderful Aaron Brasher, who is in Tennessee. I don't want to give too many personal details, but he's in the state of Tennessee.
All right.
He and I have had some email back and forths, and he's wonderful. Actually, talking about the Clynelish 9, he picked it up at a store in Tennessee and reached out to us to say it was phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
That's
I think
great.
his exact words were life-changing. And I'm not, lying when I say that. So here we go. He says, I do have another question. And again, I'm in no hurry. And I have no idea if I'm asking the right person anyway. But what's up with the Port Dundas 42 from the last retail outturn? I feel like there's been no talk about it, no reviews, nothing. I keep thinking there's got to be a story there. Why pick it? What drew SCN to it? I mean, somebody had to fall in love with something like that in order to trouble about buying it. But there's this silence! Exclamation point. I've seen one or two around, but it's kind of a scary thing to buy considering the price and the general ambivalence about single grain whiskey. Just curious. That's all. So what say you, Joshua Hatton? Can we do what we normally do? Can we start at the end and work our way backwards?
Yeah, because the last line has me a bit curious. Now, I have known people to not like grain. I've known people to love grain. I haven't met too many people who have been ambivalent about grain.
Right? Although I wonder, remember on an episode of the podcast, I'd made reference to William Grant's coming out with I want to say a 25-year-old, that number could be wrong, but in that vicinity, a 25-year-old Girvan, and they released it for too much money, and it didn't sell particularly well, and shortly thereafter, they retreated from releasing grain. And I wonder if Aaron's maybe getting at that point surrounding ambivalence when it comes from OB, official bottlings, distillery bottlings. But you and I know there's a lot of enthusiasm for grain whiskey, old and young, coming from independent bottlers.
Yeah, it's funny. I guess in a weird way, I was playing a little bit of ostrich there. You know, my head is so much within the independent bottling world. And when you think of independent bottlings, most, when they do a release, there's going to be their malts, there's going to be a grain, there's going to be a peated in there, right? There's just, this is what we do. We want to have an array of flavors. And what a way to show different flavors is to provide a different style of whiskey. So they're prevalent and they're somewhat sought after within independently bottled whiskeys. But yeah, I guess when it comes to the Girvan that Willie Grant released and maybe the Hague Club that was released, those unfortunately were not received very well when they were released. So I can see that there was an ambivalence about it.
So with that said, and I think we've clarified that end point quite nicely, if I do say so myself.
Yep.
This Port Dundas, we put it in the outturn. We certainly talked about it a little bit in the literature for the general outturn, but we didn't do a lot of legwork on it for a pretty obvious reason.
That reason being there was 92, 96 bottles? There was nothing.
A ridiculously tiny amount.
There was nothing for us to do. I mean, I think the most amount of work that we spent on that single cask was dealing with how to allocate it to different states. Oh, you need a single case? That's cool. You want 2 cases? I don't know if we could do that. Maybe you'll get the case. It was a lot of work trying to put that out there because there were so few bottles, because Port Dundas is a shuttered distillery, right? Shuttered in 2010, demolished in 2012, I want to say. And 42 years old, 96 bottles from the cask. There was no work to be done. We didn't need to work up samples to send to anybody.
Nope.
I mean,
No.
It sold out so quickly, neither of us got a bottle. So it sold out so quickly that we actually have a Single Cask Nation member / One Nation Under Whiskey listener named Chris Sweener. He's up in Massachusetts. He's a Amrut fanatic. The only way I can get my hands on a little bit of this Port Dundas was to do a sample trade with him. I gave him a little bit of the Single Cask Nation Amrut 5 to get some of my own Single Cask Nation Port Dundas 42. Yeah, so we fell madly in love with that. But the great thing about Port Dundas is that it's always had this incredibly heavy / candied style to it. And that is so attractive, even in younger Port Dundas. I remember David Stirk, under his Exclusive Regions label, released a 12-year-old Port Dundas that was just...
I know the exact release you're talking about.
Oh, it was just robust and flavorful and complex. It was delicious. So yeah, we fell in love with it. We saw the price. Ooh, that looks good. And so we said yes to it. And then we found out it only had 96 bottles.
Yeah. Yeah, that was unfortunate because it was a release that we did want to spread far and wide. We thought it would represent us and the closed distillery exceptionally well. And then the outturn came and we didn't want to walk away from something that we really liked. But at the same time, we understood, as you mentioned earlier in this answer, this is going to cause problems with allocation. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, the distributors were pretty level-headed about it. I don't think we made too many enemies in allocating it the way we did.
No, not too many. So does that answer Aaron's question? Was there another segment of it? Yeah, okay, good.
Oh, that was good. I have another email, though.
I know you have another email that we should get to. Someone also wrote us a letter, and I wanted to read a little bit of that letter.
So a letter, you say? We certainly don't get those every day. Should we be giving out the company mailing address in case anybody wants to send us a postcard or a letter, a handwritten letter?
I'll tell you what, if anyone sends us a handwritten letter, like pen pals, oh my gosh, did you have a pen pal growing up?
Absolutely.
Of course you did, so did I. I had a few of them. So yeah, if someone wants to be our pen pal, if many people want to be our pens pal or pen pals,
yes.
I think. Is it pens pal? You can write us just like this listener did. You could send us a letter or a postcard to J&J Spirits, P.O. Box 335, Guilford, Connecticut. That's Guilford. State code is CT 06437. When's the last time you asked someone to send you a letter?
This is so good. I feel like we're on a TV program from about 1986. If you'd like to get in contact with us, this is wonderful. I really hope people take us up on this. Come on, you're listening all around the world here. Send us a postcard. That would make us smile.
I don't want to read the entire letter, but there's a segment of it that I do want to read. So the letter came in from the listener. His name is Vadim. And Vadim, I apologize. I'm going to do my best with your last name. Perlovsky. That sounds good.
Sounded like an okay attempt, yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I think I did a great job there.
Well, cheers to you. Well
cheers
done.
To me, yes. So Vadim says, Dear J&J, I have to admit, I've been a huge fan for a few years. I stumbled upon One Nation Under Whiskey when I was looking for a whiskey podcast to listen to while driving to a work conference in Monterey, California, and instantly fell in love with it. It is by far my favorite podcast, and then he scratched that out. Pad cost. And my only complaint with it is when the episodes are less than 2 hours. Oh my gosh, that makes me feel great.
I can just imagine the listeners right now who are screaming, "Don't encourage them. Don't tell them that." Soon you'll be getting the director's cut version of the pad cost.
Now, this next sentence is very near and dear to my heart. You really set the bar with the way you do the interviews. And then this is the part here. Now, that's very nice. And I do thank Vadim for that. But here's the gold. This is the money shot. And the production quality is the best in the industry. Mm-hmm. Oof, I love a good compliment.
Even when Jason sounds like he's speaking from the bottom of a well during the Dr. Kirsty episode.
Well, if you spoke into the right microphone, we wouldn't have that issue. Anyway, he goes on and he says, I love the different guests that you feature and the variety of topics that you discuss. The jokes and banter are a huge plus, and I love the little audio snippets you insert at times. Honestly, there are a lot of reasons I'm a fan. The podcast is fantastic. It's easy to listen to. I learn something new every time, be it about whiskey or Indiana Jones movies. And now that I've had a chance to try some of the whiskey you put out, I can see why it sells out in minutes. Great job. And then we're going to end it with this. You two are role models for the whiskey industry, but also for friendship goals. Every time I listen to the intro, I can hear the friendship you guys have, and that's really inspiring. Thank you for that.
I'm glad my short temper doesn't come across in the introductions.
I was trying to think, okay, short temper, what about his long something? And I couldn't think of anything to play off of, so that was a wonderfully kind letter. That's so really beautiful. It really was. So Vadim, thank you so much for sending that in. It really means a lot that you would take out the time to write that letter to us.
And to think that we would feature that letter in an episode that's about to run 3.5 hours, I think really speaks to how we plan.
This episode is as long as the movie Gandhi. The kids love that reference.
I was going to say, is that an India reference because it's a Paul John episode?
Like, oh wow! I hadn't even thought about that. I just remember going to see Gandhi with my dad and falling asleep in the theater.
Yeah. Great movie
for an adult. That came out in 1982. I think I was 9 at the time. Anyway. Jason, you had another email you wanted to get to?
I do have another email here. Let's see. Who are we going to get this from? Oh, I know who we'll pick on here. We are going to reach for Tony Rivera.
All right. The good balancer.
He used to come at us as balancer. And so, Tony, it's a tremendous email. There's 3 very lengthy questions here. I'm only going to do the first. Okay. So, and then Tony, as we've done with Liz in Seattle many a time, we may very well return to one of your questions in a future episode.
Just in defense of Balancer / Anthony, do you think he minds you calling him Tony?
It says Tony right here.
Okay. All right, I'm just thinking. I want to look out for him. Jesus, is that cool? Are you cool with that, Jay? You cool with that, Jay?
Joshuas of the world. Anyway, moving on. What was that about short temper? Anywho, here we go. With the recent travel restrictions and businesses temporarily closing or working from home, do you see the well running a bit drier for all independent bottlers for what they may offer in 2021? Particularly, will there be a bit less in 2021 from Single Cask Nation? Cheers, Tony Rivera.
Yeah, cheers. That's an interesting question. When this whole COVID thing started, there were definitely closures, right? There were warehouses that were just shut. There were bottling halls that were just shut. There were distilleries that in Scotland, I don't think many Scottish distilleries were producing hand sanitizers. They were either going about business as usual because a lot of what happens in the distillery is automated by computers, or they just shut down temporarily. However, I think currently that's turned around a little bit.
Correct.
And we're seeing warehouses open. Bottling halls are opening. We've gotten things bottled. Things are slower. There's no doubt about that. But do you see this turning into us or any other independent bottler releasing fewer whiskeys in 2021?
I think there was the potential for it with you and I being US based. Mm-hmm. I think if you're UK based and you all experience the same length of lockdown, everybody is coming back from the same place. And we've heard from many people in the industry, not every facility shut down. Mm-hmm. Because production can be run with a skeleton crew of 2 and they can socially distance very easily. Production really wasn't hit by this.
No, not really.
The warehouses that you're talking about and the bottling halls that you're talking about are really those who would serve independent bottlers. And so for you and I in the United States, obviously right now we can only fly to the United Kingdom if we go into quarantine for 2 weeks when we get there.
Do we need a visa as well? I think we might need a work visa as well currently.
Well, the British citizen has not looked into that aspect of it. One of us can walk into his home country quite easily. My point is, you and I go to Scotland for 4 days. You and I go to Scotland for 7 days. If we have to build in a 2-week quarantine, that would have to be on the front end and the back end when we then returned home. You and I would be out of commission for a very long time. It just ain't going to work. But a bit like the world has embraced Zoom and Zoom meetings and Zoom tastings, we have embraced, and those we work with have embraced, the rapid shipping of samples. Mm-hmm. And like you correctly said, yes, there was a period where no samples were moving anywhere. Mm-hmm. But before that and after that, here's one of the things that we've talked about a few times. As independent bottlers, our brains are always 6 months in the future. Always. Yep. And so the fact that we're sitting here towards the end of August, you and I are already into the first quarter of 2021. Mm-hmm. And so always thinking ahead, we had to get our heads around what is 2021 going to look like and how do we prepare for that? At the same time thinking, how do we close out 2020? That's been part of what we've talked about in today's episode. However, I don't know if listeners have had the same experience that you and I have had. But on the consumer side of things, I really battened down the hatches in the beginning of lockdown. I was like, okay, I've got plenty of whiskey. I don't need to be going to liquor stores. Clearly, we're not going to bars. Clearly, we're not doing tastings. I'm just going to consume what I've got on hand. This is a bunker situation. Mm-hmm. And I've got plenty of nice brown spirits in my bunker. And that worked 2 months, maybe 3 months. And then, and I hope this is like our listeners, I got kind of bored and kind of fed up not buying anything. And I thought, oh, I'll just buy a couple. Just a couple of new things. Just to have on the shelf, get them opened, have a wee taste. And as soon as I took my finger out of the dike, holy moly, was I covered in salty sea spray. I went bananas, and I have been buying like there's no tomorrow. And I would echo that you and I as a company, we have done more buying in the last 2 or 3 months than we have done at any point in almost 10 years of our history.
Agreed.
And we are now sitting on so many casks in Scotland that when the time comes and we re-gauge them and we pull samples from them and we go through our own focused sampling for what the future will hold, I think you and I might run up against the opposite of what Tony is suggesting here, which is we're going to have to be very careful how we build out the next few releases, because I think there's going to be a level of excitement where we want to show off this cask that we bought, and this cask that we bought, and this other cask that we bought, and, you know, this rum over here, and this Indian over there, and it's like, yeah, I think we're going to have the opposite problem.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? We've purchased so many casks. You know, and just thinking back to 2011 when we started the business, up until not too long ago, we just didn't have much of an inventory. We always sort of bought on the spot. If we liked it, you know, we'd bottle it and we'd sell it. Sometimes we'd finish this here, finish that there, or something like that. But now we're in a situation where we've got a good inventory here. I'm so excited about 2021 and seeing how these casks develop. And
Exactly.
Right? So, yeah, so I agree with you. I think we're going to have a bit of an opposite problem. I think the only thing that can affect independent bottlings coming into the U.S. is the consumer's reaction to just continual 25% tariffs, right? It may change what we put into the U.S. to try to keep prices down, right? So we're looking at different styles of whiskey. We're looking at different countries of origin and different spirit types. Like, we've always wanted to do fun and interesting stuff. Now we have 25% tariffs that are forcing us to get a little more fun and a little more interesting in different ways as well.
Yeah, for listeners of One Nation Under Whiskey who haven't dipped their toe into Extra Extra, It's All About Whiskey yet, the last 2 episodes of Extra Extra, we've spent 30 minutes each time talking more about the 25% tariffs. And while, yes, we'll be the first people to admit it's not the most exciting topic, I would much rather be talking about the 4 movies that make up the Indiana Jones series. Right? As would you, Joshua. Maybe you want to talk about the Aliens trilogy and the 4th movie that's coming out there.
I think you mean the 4 Alien movies and then the prequels, but continue.
Too easy. Too easy. But yes, if you haven't dipped your toe into Extra Extra, we do have a little chat about that over there. And even in the last episode offered up a little suggestion, which did get some feedback from friends that they are going to write to senators, see if they can expand upon these 13 senators who made the bipartisan call to drop the 25% tariffs. So there you go.
So, yeah. Well,
that's it for the with and the.
We have to get out of here. But Jason, did you have something that you have to say? I feel like I'm stepping in your toes. You're stepping. Yeah. No, okay.
You're perfect. I liked exactly what you did, which is why I didn't continue to talk over the top of you.
So we do want to get out of here. But before we get out of here, Jason, we received a new comment on Apple Podcasts about the podcast, and so I wanted to read that.
Brilliant. And for anybody who hasn't done that, please do. It really helps us find a new audience, an expanding audience. And yeah, isn't it fun to tell somebody there's something they might enjoy? You might tell them for 12 years and they might never watch it, but at least you've done your civic duty of getting out there and telling somebody about it. Wow. And we would both appreciate that.
I feel like you're just spacing out there. Anyway, the comment here on Apple Podcasts, the title is Up My Alley.
Whoa.
And
with a rubber hose?
It's 5 stars. And the author is War_Weasel. Could be Wiesel. I don't know, but I think it's Weasel.
How's it spelled?
Like a weasel. I'm just trying to get fancy with words. And so War Weasel says, I discovered SCN a few years ago tasting whiskey at Jack Rose in D.C. with a 5-year-old Lafroig. It was amazing. I joined the ranks of the nation and recently started listening to the, quote, podcast. God, I love how everybody just champions my not knowing how to use the English language.
I'm gonna say, just in honor of Wereweasel, which is a brilliant, brilliant name. I am
War Weasel.
War Weasel. In honor of the great War Weasel. I'm actually going to open and pour the Lafroig 5 right now as I listen to this comment. Oh, there's a lot of char in this. I've been getting more and more emails from people about the char in the bottom of their Lafroigs. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah. A lot of flocculation in the lipids as well. Carry on.
You flocculate on your own terms and behind closed doors. Anyway, it says, I've never really been a podcast guy, but Joshua and Jason's knowledge, enthusiasm, and humility combined, right?
It's my favorite thing about myself. I love my humility. I tell everybody I meet about my humility.
He really knows us. He knows how much humility we have. It's really
Cheers.
Good. So their enthusiasm and humility combined with my kind of sense of humor make this my go-to. I'm right around their age, so all of the references are completely natural to me. It's another Oldman.
Yeah, the kids really love our references.
Yeah, like I said, we could talk about Gandhi in the next one. Anyway.
I feel like a Gandhi reference is somewhat timely. It's somewhat timeless.
Somewhat.
I do think Gandhi the movie might be a little timed out, but here we are.
I will warn of a danger to the bank account. I've already made several purchases based on listening to the episodes, and he gives an example, and this is what I love. Most people would assume he's talking about single cast nation releases, but his point, he says, the infrequent flyers was challenging to an American, but I got it done. So he listened to our interview with Ali Walker of Infrequent Flyers, and he said, no, you know what? That sounds interesting. I'm going to give it a go. How cool is that? That's really cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And he goes on, he says, if you have even a passing interest in whiskey, please do not pass this one up. You'll regret it, which sounds like he's threatening bodily harm to anyone who tries to pass this up.
He is the War Weasel. Do not fall victim to the War Weasel.
Var Wiesel, I think it is. Listen, I know I said that we wanted to get out on this, but there is something that we have to tell our listeners, and it's in conjunction. This was huge.
This was huge.
This was beyond huge, and this is in conjunction with letting people know how they can get in touch with us, right?
What I've got that's beyond huge remains out of shot while we're recording this, but I appreciate your generosity of spirit. Let me put it like that.
So, Jason and I have secured an interview with the one and only Will Oldham. Now, if you don't know the name Will Oldham, you might know the name Bonnie Prince Billy, the musician Bonnie Prince Billy. That's his stage name. His real name is Will Oldham. He was also in a band called Palace Brothers, also Palace Music. You might have seen him in the new movie A Ghost Story with Casey Affleck. He was like the one guy in the movie that had any amount of speaking parts in it. But if you like alt country / Americana / just fun folk kind of stuff, he is the modern godfather of it. I mean, he's so well regarded, even Johnny Cash covered one of his songs.
That's a hell of a thing to bring up at parties.
Right. So we are interviewing him on September 8th for a future episode. So if you have any questions for the good Will Oldham / Bonnie Prince Billy, or just questions in general, please get them to us. You can email us questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com. You could tweet at us @OneNationWhiskey. You could Instagram message us at One Nation Under Whisky, or you can just send us a message through Facebook. Just go to the search bar, look up One Nation Under Whisky, and you can message us either through our page or our group page there.
Do you want to give the mailing address one more time?
And if you want to get a letter out to us, which we would love.
Or a postcard.
We'd love to see your handwriting. No ransom notes, though, please.
Yeah, please.
Our address is P.O. Box, and you can send it to J&J Spirits. It's P.O. Box 335, Guilford, Connecticut. That's Guilford, CT 06437.
I know we've been saying we're getting out of here on the last three things, but we also had something else great happen last week, which is Unfiltered magazine, the magazine of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, came out and they did a little piece on whiskey podcasts, just as we're listening to War Weasel talk about us here. And there's a quote in here from Richard McKeand, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yep.
And he is just quoted saying the most wonderful thing. So this is from Unfiltered with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. These are their words first. What it is. One Nation Under Whisky is hosted by independent bottlers, festival organisers and tour company owners Joshua Hatton and Jason Johnston-Yellen. With 4 seasons of episodes, the duo, from Connecticut and Ayrshire respectively, talk about their work, while also providing news and interviews with industry experts, which is brilliant. That's so beautiful. That captures us so beautifully. And then Richard's quotes, I'm guessing Richard was one of the people who nominated us for this kind of awareness post.
Right.
Richard writes, hosts Joshua and Jason are whiskey experts who aren't done learning, and from the outset, this podcast will educate and entertain everyone who's listening. Joined each episode by some seriously special guests, this often hilarious and at all times informative podcast will suit everyone from the aspiring whiskey drinker to the seasoned whiskey geek. And that was Richard McKeand.
That just brings a massive smile to my face. You know I love the compliments, Jason.
But here's the thing you and I said to each other. You texted that to me and we wrote back and forth for a little bit.
Yeah.
It just captured what we are most proud about with this podcast.
100, and not just the Scotch Malt Whisky Society's words, but Richard's as well. Everything we're trying to put forward has been picked up by both parties, and we set out to do a task, and it's being received as such. It just makes me so damn happy to see that's how people are receiving us.
Yeah,
really does.
I loved it. You know, I didn't like the recognition just for the sake of recognition, but the recognition that hopefully we're doing this the right way and we're having a ton of fun doing it. We've got an amazing listener base, absolutely tremendous. And long may it continue. We're going to continue churning these out, and we're going to continue interviewing industry folk, and we're going to continue being whiskey geeks first and foremost, and good friends who are having a bit of a laugh along the way.
Indeed. That is a perfect place to get out on, Jason.
I'm going to cheers you all with my SCN Lafroig 5, bottled September of 2016.
And I'm going to cheers you all with my sample bottle of the Single Cask Nation Paul John, Cask 6341, with my Cadenheads Paul John bottling, the 6-year-old from the warehouse.
Cheers, everybody. Until the next time. Chin chin.
Cheers. 2 chins.